I'm going to start coming here every Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to have our rise in vibrations. Okay, that's the goal. Recreation. Recreation is a seldom discussed topic in philosophical treatises. It's usually seen as an activity that is performed in order to achieve some type of regeneration of one's physical and psychological self. It is also seen as a source of fun and excitement. But from a deeper investigation, the understanding of commonly accepted forms of recreation becomes inadequate because activity based on recreational activities have built into them the elements of disappointment. Usually they are based on competition, which pits individuals or teams against each other in a format that is designed to produce and promote conflict. Upon closer investigation and understanding, it becomes clear that the mind seeks to place itself in the most pleasurable environment or situations possible. However, the search leads it to believe that these situations will be found in activities. Therefore, whenever it experiences something pleasurable, it seeks to repeat that activity. If the activity involves winning, as in a game, they are bound for disappointment because it cannot occur each time the activity is undertaken. If the times of disappointment are used for introspection, it will become obvious that there is more to life on this earth besides that which can be seen, felt, touched, heard, or smelled. A whole new world opens for exploration and true recreation. True recreation, what we call recreation, is fully conscious, detached, and peaceful. Only then is it possible to feel and appreciate the nature of one's being, of creation itself. The highest degree of recreation is therefore experienced at the point of enlightenment. Harold Hood realized here, every activity in life becomes play. Life itself becomes a divine sport. In the Indian Vedanta philosophy, this concept is called Leela. There develops a continuous blissful feeling that does not pass from moment to moment, as with those who move from activity to activity, searching for thrill to make them feel alive. But existence becomes eternity right in the very present moment. As modern physics shows, time is only a mental concept people put on intervals of eternity. I love that. As modern physics shows, time is only a mental concept people put on intervals of eternity. I like that. The only reason why we believe time actually passes is because our minds are always concerned with the past or future events and rarely with the present moment. Raising one's spiritual awareness means becoming alive in the present, the here and now. Recreation becomes a means to recreate one's consciousness at every moment instead of a means to forget oneself and pass the time. That's good, right? Recreation, the things that we do or take interest in, we can, hey Ralph, we can use them to help us become more conscious, not to lose ourselves, not to escape, right? Life problems and situations become easy to deal with regardless of what happens because you understand that your existence do not depend on them. In fact, they depend on you. And furthermore, as Ra rises each morning, there's a cycle set up by the Netchers so that nothing lasts forever in the cosmos. All things good and bad progress in an endless cycle. So negative situations will eventually give way to better ones, and vice versa. Thus, armed with this higher understanding, life itself becomes play in the deepest sense of the meaning. Even though externally participating in life's victories and defeats, internally one becomes a witness to life rather than a participant who is bound to the apparent reality. Mere intellectual knowledge of this is far reaching, but intuitive realization of it within one's own consciousness is beyond words. There are a few key points that stood out to me here. One, on time. The only reason we believe that time actually passes is because our minds are always concerned with the past or future events and rarely with the present moment. And that causes me to think about moments where you lose track of time. We call it getting lost in time. You didn't realize time was passing. Or you feel like it should be later, but it's earlier. And you feel like it should be earlier, but it's later. And Friday feels like Saturday, and this doesn't feel like Sunday. That's how we can see that the reason we really think that time passes is because we are concerned with a feeling that we had before. So we're comparing this present moment to the past, or we want to recreate it, right? So the other part that stood out to me is modern physics shows that time is only a mental concept that people put on intervals of eternity. I got to breathe right there. Because when you think about the vastness of that, intervals of eternity, where eternity is a continuum that never begins and it never ends. And here we are on this little speck of a point of eternity, and we think that's all there is. And we put our whole minds on that, and we put our whole lives on that. But there's an invitation to come out of this thought process. So yesterday, I was talking about the golden intersection of timelines, which is a cosmic event that happened on October 14th and 15th, just a few days ago. And we celebrated the convergence of three timelines. And why that's important is because when the time system, the timekeeping system, specifically here, other places too, but specifically here, I'm talking because we're here in the West. When we adopted that Gregorian calendar, there were days skipped on the calendar to catch our time up with the rest of the people who were, or rest of the countries who had adopted the Gregorian calendar, which means that on October 4th, if you looked at the calendar in 1582, October 4th would be here, and the next day was October 15th. They sped up the calendar to help us catch up. So I'm not pointing at that being right or wrong. What I am pointing at is the way that programmed our collective mind to think about time. So if you imagine going to sleep one night, it's October 4th, and you wake up the next morning, it's October 15th, we can see how timelines of confusion began to be released. Timelines of mistrust began to be released. Timelines of loss and not enough time began to be activated, and we entered through into that as a collective. And so if we are to take ourselves out of that collective, out of the timeline of confusion and chaos and distrust and loss that was unleashed, then we have to have a nice concept of time and a way to take ourselves out of it. This is Kemetic wisdom, right? Ancient Kemetic wisdom. So this is coming about like around 3000 BCE. So that's not even 3000 BC. Like it was before the Common Era. So this is information that can help us navigate our lives today. So I'm just going to read it again. As modern physics shows, time is only a mental concept people put on intervals of eternity. So if you knew, hey Yeshua, if you knew that time is a concept that we superimposed upon eternity, would you want to plug into that only, or would you desire to look into and plug into eternity? How do we plug into eternity? It's through the present moment, because if time is a mental concept of measuring moments, right, then the present moments becomes the way that we experience eternity. And we would be at more peace if we did that, because we wouldn't be so concerned about the past, and we wouldn't be so concerned about the future and where we're going and how fast we're going to get there and what we're going to do after we get off of work and what are we going to do after we do this, or trying to get it to do. All the scurrying can go away. And even though we're still living by the constructed time that is given to this realm, we are in it, but not of it. That's what the scriptures say, right? We are in the world, but not of it. This is an example of how we can apply that here. So time is a mental concept that we place on eternity. So what if you come out of the mental concept and step into eternity? Hey, love, how you doing? Love Lily. This is an invitation, right, to more. This is not a new concept. It says life problems and situations become easy to deal with regardless of what happens, because you understand your existence do not depend on them. In fact, these things depend on you. Hey, M Gold, and I'm glad you're well. Blessings. I'm always helping us live a healthier and a happier life. Right. So if you're new here, welcome. My name is Veronica Marie. I am also Somi, right? And that's a story in and of itself. And what we're doing is studying practices, instituting spiritual practices through changing our minds, right? Be no longer conformed to the ways of the world, but be transformed, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then the old things can pass away. Old ways of anxiety, right? Old ways of ruminating on the past. We can actually come into the present moment and experience eternity. And what is the result? More peace. What is the result? More happiness, because we're not plugged into what happened. And I'm not saying what happened isn't important. It is. There's work for that. But a spiritual practice, right, is presence. Another thing that stood out to me is remembering all good things and bad, what we perceive as good and bad, progress in an endless cycle. So it reminds me of the law of polarity, the Hermetic principle, right? The extent and degree to which the pendulum swings to the left, it will come back and swing to the right. So sometimes we're experiencing heavy moments. We got to hang on and understand that the Hermetic principles, the laws of the land, the ancient people tell us that it must end. You know, I often find myself saying that to myself, this must come to an end. This must shift. Shifts must happen. So if you know that shifts must happen, and you know this particular point will end, whether it be exciting or not, then you plug into the moment and extract the wisdom that is available there. This is how we get to experience eternity. If we know that we are spirits, right, navigating this human existence in the density that we call a body, then understand that eternity is your nature. That's why you don't want good things to end. That's why you don't want relationships to end, or when you're eating something good, you don't want it to end. There's a Bible scripture that says God, has placed eternity in our hearts. We are naturally plugged into eternity. And that's why when we experience hard things, it feels like it's lasting forever because we're plugged into eternity. This is how, when we are experiencing something we love and we're passionate about, we can lose track of time. This is all our experience of eternity. And we need more and more experience of that to come out of the system and matrix of anxiety and ruminating in the past. And we can actually experience the peace that we really want to experience. Then our peace won't be determined by who is around, who is saying what is going on or not going on. It will be a state of being that we are, and we tap into it. Does that make sense? Hey, Butterfly, thank you. So now I'm going to wrap this up by reading on relationships. It says, it should be clear by now to the reader that he or she is not the body, the mind, the senses, nor the ego personality. That's a big one. Because a lot of times we feel upset because we identify with ego personality. Who you talking to? You ain't gonna talk to me no kind of way. People who talk like that are very identified with their ego personality. And the problem with identifying with that ego personality is you get offended easily. And you take things personally easily. And that means you create suffering for yourself easily and with the people around you easily. And you're thinking, oh, I'm easy to deal with. I'm easy. And you really are a challenge because you build the challenge. Okay? Further, it must be clear that the world as our senses perceive it is not what it appears to be. You got to receive that also. What does that mean, right? What it means in the smallest sense, not the smallest as in the least profound, but in the simplest way, that your eyes are not seeing things as they are. Hey, Keitha, good morning, greetings. I know I love it too. I even want to recreate it. The world that we see, we have to realize that too, that we perceive is not what it appears to be. When you're looking out, you're seeing collections of space, energy, light waves, but we call it solid because our skin and our senses is built to perceive the world a certain way. And that sense is beautiful, but also we must realize that this is not all there is. We become caught up in the concepts of time. Remember, I just told you that time is a concept that we superimpose on eternity. We have eternity in our hearts. And that's how dwelling on the past and the future takes us out of the present. And everything that we need is in the present. Everything that we will know is in the present because spirit is in the eternal present. Right? So as soon as you take yourself out of the present and you begin to identify with this ego, personality, ideas and such, you take yourself out of your natural empowerment and you come into a false reality. And the things you experience begin to be false and they lead to discomfort. The discomfort is meant to bring you back into your God mind of eternity. Right? Does that make sense? At least intellectually, you must by now understand that your true identity is spirit, which is neither male nor female. Therefore, what is the nature of relationships in the physical form, and what is their purpose? That's a rhetorical question because you know they're about to answer it. right? This is Kemetic wisdom. One must understand that God places one, our higher self, God, spirit, places one in situations and relationships based upon one's own meskinit, which is your identity and desires. We're not talking about God out there. We're talking about the kingdom of heaven in here. You get in relationships based upon your identity and desires. In other words, you get in relationships based upon how you see yourself and what you desire. Your higher self brings you there. We're examining the nature of relationships from Kemetic wisdom. All right. So, thus, it is one's very own consciousness that draws one's relationship to one. As that consciousness changes and evolves, so too will one's relationships and karmic destiny. Thus, our destiny is not predetermined, rather, we create it at every moment. We're creating at any and every moment from how we see ourselves and our desires. You don't entertain things that you don't see yourself entertaining. Your perception of self guides your behavior. Your perception of self guides your interaction with people. Your perception of self will cause you to form a relationship in order to experience, right, evolution. Hey, Divine. Thank you for joining the fan club. Let me continue. As that consciousness changes and evolves, so too will one's relationship and karmic destiny. Our destiny is not predetermined. We create it. So this is not a situation where God in the universe is sending someone or something into your frame of reference. No, you are creating it. And if you take that as the deepest truth, then you can recreate it. In coming into the physical realm and vivifying matter, that's your physical body, the spirit gains experience through various situations in the process called living. The spirit is continuously evolving, striving, in other words, to return to its original state of oneness called Hetep. It is lost when it becomes attached to physical form. The problem arises when the mind believes itself to be a separate entity from others and develops an ego. In forgetting itself, the spirit searches for unity, oneness, ma'at. But in believing what the mind tells it through the senses, the spirit identifies with that information and begins to search for unity and oneness in a way the limited senses and mind have convinced it to search. Is that making sense? I'm almost done because I have a session at 8:30. I'm going to come back to this. Childhood is an important period in developing one's sense of identity and correct understanding about the nature of reality. The ego personality develops desires and conjures up ideas as how to achieve the fulfillment of those desires. And I'm going to pause right there because I'll have to come back. We're reading Kemetic spirituality and applying it into this life to experience more health and more happiness, more ease. You think that relationships come with trouble and problems and effort. I've been saying this for years and I believe it. It does not have to be, but it does have to be if you don't understand these principles that we're talking about. Then you have to have a relationship the way your limited mind and senses allow you to have it. You have to fuss and fight and debate and tussle and make problems and not solve them and get upset. You have to do all of that. But when you begin your spiritual practice and understand that all of life is sacred and you understand the nature of it, then you release those needs and you experience more wellness in your relationships and within yourself. That's Kemetic wisdom. Okay, my name is Veronica Marie. I'm usually not on this early, but I will be now every Friday at 8 a.m. to 8:30, and we're going to study wisdom to evolve. All right, that's it. Have a look at my website, see how we can work together. I have books there, all of that. And I have a Bible study coming up today at noon. I have a Bible study coming today at noon for unconventional souls. So that's Eastern Standard Time. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye, y'all.